Hello, everybody. Welcome to Energy Transformation Week. My name is Tara Taglienti. I'm an energy transformation artist, and I am so excited about today's conversation, today's interview. It's going to be all about what if there's a different possibility with autism, ADD, ADHD, OCD, all those labels. What if there's a totally different possibility with people, with adults and children that have these labels or have been given these labels? What if, right? So today I would like to introduce Diva Diaz. She's an Access Consciousness facilitator, and she works directly with Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness. And you, Diva, since I have known you, you've lived in like 3 different countries or on 3 different continents, and you travel the world. I met Diva. I'm gonna go ahead and tell a little bit of story, and then I'll let you talk. I'm sorry. Let me tell this story. I first attended a class that was a different possibility or a new idea with autism and all these labels, right? At a level 2 and 3 class in Fort Lauderdale, like years ago, a couple years ago, and it was one of those classes where I was just like, I'm not sure if I really need to go here, but the things that you talked about and the things that you spoke about when you were sharing like, it had me look at the way that I think and the way that I see things, and just started to put pieces together for me that, it changed the way that I started to view me. And then when I took the X-Men class, I took it recently with you when you were in Fort Lauderdale, and that had me relating to myself and the rest of the world and the way that I function in the world totally different. And I'm really grateful to bring you out. I just wanted to bring you out and just introduce, and yeah, so what brought you, like, talk about who you be, like any holes that I didn't mention, and then what brought you to facilitate these classes?
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, hi.
Sorry,
No, it's so funny. I didn't remember that was the first class that you did, the one in Fort Lauderdale. That was such a fun class. Yeah, thank you for for being there. But yeah, I mean, I started Access, I'd say probably about 6 years ago, and I came across this information about the X-Men, which was created by Gary Douglas, and like the X-Men Marvel comics and the movies where you've got like these superheroes that have these amazing capacities and superpowers, but they kind of hide them because they feel like they're complete weirdos. And so all the information that was in these classes and, in the books about this stuff was talking about how much of what we think is wrong with us is actually an amazing talent. And the more I started to look at it, the more I kind of like could see myself in it so much, so hugely, that pretty much every single piece of information that I read just like completely rocked my universe. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got started, I guess.
Cool. Well, one of the things that got to me is your story about watching the movie with Temple Grandin. Like, how did that, like, could you share with everyone out there, like, that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone watching hasn't seen that movie, I highly recommend it. It's called Temple Grandin, and Temple's this amazing, she's a speaker for autism, and, she's done other things like revolutionize, like, the slaughterhouses in America. I don't know. She's just this phenomenal woman. And the movie is all about her and her autism. And, so I watched this movie. Someone recommended it to me. And the moment that I sat down, it started to describe the way that Temple's brain and mind works and the way that she sees things. Like a really clear example is like she thinks in pictures. Like everything for her is images. Like she doesn't think in words or in any other way. And it wasn't until I saw that I realized that that's different, that not everybody thinks only in pictures.
Yeah.
And so it was like somebody describing the contents of my mind in a movie,
Yeah.
when I never thought that it was something different. I was convinced that everybody thought the same that I did. So I think I sat there and like cried for the whole thing, because it was so, I mean, it was so precise and exact. And, you know, that's when I realized that actually the way that I function is very different. You know, I haven't been diagnosed with autism or anything like that, but I have always known that I did like receive information very differently, and the way that I communicated was different, and the way that I, you know, just perceived the world was different. I remember I was working in Saudi Arabia at one point, and I was speaking with my work colleague, and we were both describing the same situation, and he was describing it in words, and I was describing the whole picture, but he couldn't see the picture. And that was the first time that I started questioning, going, hold on, you don't remember the layout of the room, and you don't remember the angles at which the windows were, and that one curtain was slightly askew, and it, you know, was just off a 45-degree angle, which was driving me crazy, and I couldn't take my eyes off it, you know, whatever. And he was like, what are you talking about, you absolute weirdo? No, like, and so that, you know, that wasn't like a huge defining moment, but I remember it so clearly because it was one of the times where I was like, hold on a minute, like, does everyone have a different way of thinking, like drastically different, you know, because it's not really something that you talk about over coffee, like, oh, by the way, how are you perceiving this room right now, you know?
Although we're right now having coffee and being like, so how do you perceive the world, like, you know? I think, like, so just so you know, earlier, before I brought, before we jumped on the hangout, I was telling Diva that I perceive my numbers. I see them, actually. I see my 10s, they go in rows like this. 1 to 10 goes to here, and then 10 to 20 here, and it goes like this. And then my 100s go out. Or my you know, higher than 20, it goes, like, out. It juts out. It's just really interesting. That's just how I've always seen it. And, you know, like, hey, you know, if it's just kind of like, I did not, when you told that story in your class, it was like a light bulb went on for me, and I was like, you mean not everybody thinks this way? Like, it kind of was like a pop for me, and I was just like,
I get it.
You know, and the way that, like, sometimes, you know, I'll be doing certain things, or if I go into certain incidences, like, say I was on an airplane, and I was holding onto a stuffed animal. I was actually watching the X-Men movie on this plane, and I could feel my palms and my feet just pulsing energy, and I was just like, does anybody, like, see me right now? I feel like I'm all jittery and stuff like that. And it was just like, I felt like I was getting downloads as I was watching the movie. And I remember I remember mentioning that in the X-Men class, and it was just like, it was like, okay, so not most people don't function that way, right? And I was just so aware of, like, these energetic downloads as I was watching the movie. It was so interesting.
Absolutely. So different. I mean, it's like the thing that I've discovered is, you know, the society is so quick to label oh, look, that kid doesn't need much sleep, and they can't really focus on stuff, so they must be ADHD. I know, let's medicate him, you know, or this person, blah blah blah. Let's label them as that. But what I've realized, there are, you know, people in the world that are, like, their brains are just wired differently. Like, there are some people that are just hypersensitive. I was reading an article the other day that was written by, so it's probably not much help that I mention it here, but it was a doctor who worked with autistic kids, and then he ended up having a child who was autistic, and he's written a series of, where it's called something like, he calls it like hypersensitivity or something, but rather than like a disability, he looks at how these kids are much more aware, and that's the same point of view that Access has, which is like, what if it's not exactly a disability, you know, because if you're treating something and it's not that thing, then you treating it isn't going to make a difference, because you're not actually treating the correct thing. You're not really looking at what's going on. So we look at, like, okay, what would it be like to actually speak the language of these kids and adults and learn the way they actually are perceiving the world, work with that rather than try and get them to function the way that we do. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, you know, these people are just hypersensitive, if you want to call it that, or hyper aware. So the information that they receive is far more acute and often intense than for the rest of the world. So yeah.
Yeah, and like hence the name of so for me personally, I you know the title of this is Energy Transformation Week, and for me personally, it's like all about you know the story, right? In the was 5 years ago, January 10th, right? I had this nervous breakdown, and that kind of led me to get to know myself as a healer, as someone who works with energy and perceives things with energy. And you know, and what I've got from the class is that these kids and adults, their first language is energy. And would you say that that's kind of like something that, like, how does it all tie in with energy?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny because I was giving a talk the other day in Slovenia, and but you know, there's a lot of people who haven't been really introduced to the access work or tools or processes. But what I was looking at was like, you know, everything is energy. Even science tells us this. You know, these people are far more aware of actually like the vibe of what's going on than perhaps the verbal communication. So, you know, it's like we've all had the experience of walking into a room and knowing exactly the vibe of the people, whether they're angry, whether they're happy, even if nothing is being said. And for kids and adults, that kind of energy, that vibe, that sense, whatever you want to call it, that to them is far more real than anything that may come out of your mouth. Because for them, what is language and stuff is information that's received in a very different way. So for them to process it is actually, it takes a lot longer and is far harder work than to actually perceive what's really going on in terms of like the most, I like to kind of look at it as like, you know, a bit like nature, you know, the way that nature functions, it's kind of like, or even like a baby, like a baby isn't necessarily going to understand the words that you're saying to them, but they do get the vibe of what you're communicating. And you see that now in nature, you know, like the natural state of the planet. And so that's something that whenever I talk about that in these classes and these seminars, people who have kids that have these, you know, disabilities or these labels, or if they themselves have been labeled, they always go, oh my God, yes, that's exactly what it is. You know, so it's really interesting because it's something very basic, yet somehow it can be turned into something very weird if you're not actually looking at it from a really just realistic point of view. It's like, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah, I mean, and so for me personally, is like I can, when somebody tells me something and it doesn't match the energy of what they're being, like if they say, like, I can tell when people are lying, I can tell when people are, you know, when things don't match, I start to get really annoyed, you know, and so I've seen, you know, videos out there, and I've met, you know, I have some friends who have autistic children, and even my friends, right, have told me, you know, what if, like, I don't think that there's, you know, they're so quick to label and say that something is wrong or with them, right? Or like it's, oh, they're autistic, oh no, or you know, they're OCD or ADHD, oh no, right? But then I have friends of mine that are just like, you know what? I really think that my son, I think he's just really, like, they learn more from him than they do, you know, outside. And they're just like, I've even had friends tell me, I think my son is just way more advanced than anybody on the planet, right? And they're all proud. But it's just like, what do you think about, you know, about those labels, like when they're created as a wrongness, like what does that do, and what is, like, what's your spin on it? And what's Access's spin on it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. And it's interesting because you've touched on so many different things there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but because each one I wanted to go, yeah, that, that's like a whole thing, which is so awesome because really this topic is like huge, and I'm so grateful that you invited me to chat for like this conversation. But
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, to me, it's really interesting. I mean, definition by definition in itself is a limitation because it doesn't actually allow for anything other than that which you've defined to show up in your awareness because you're now only looking for everything that matches the definition. So it's like, when you label somebody, are you willing to actually see them as a being and as a person with a whole number of things going on, or are you always looking to how that relates to the disability? I work with so many parents of kids who are asking me, like, my child, like, what's wrong with my child? And, the point of view of access, which is certainly my point of view as well, is that what if there's nothing wrong with these kids or with these adults? What if they just function very differently? What if they are just different? And that's something Temple Grandin says as well. I think she even wrote a book which is called something like I'm Just Different or something like that. But it's this amazing book which really looks at like, for what reason would we all have to behave the same way? Like, what benefit is there to labeling people? What I see over and over is that kids that have been labeled, their parents don't seem to get further than that label, or they seem to get to a certain place and then they can't go beyond that in terms of like development or having their child, have any kind of success at school or, whatever that is. So what's happening now is that there are more and more people showing up going, this is great, and apparently my kid, or apparently I have this label, but now I can't see beyond it, like there must be something else possible. So this is where the access tools to me are just such a gift, because what they do is they don't look at it so much as a whole, but they do, but they also are looking at each individual, and it's really based on asking questions. And asking questions is so simple, but it can also be so dynamic in the sense that you're never being stuck on that conclusion or definition or limitation of what you've decided is or isn't. So what you're willing to do is go, hey, I know that you've been labeled with this, but what do you know about this? Like, what are you perceiving? What are you aware of? Because for each person it will be so different. And as you ask those questions, the way that you would in anything, if you're looking for it to grow, if you're looking for a business to grow, you're going to ask questions. If you're looking for a relationship to improve, you're going to ask questions. So, it's interesting to me how, this applies so globally, and it's just the results that I've seen are dynamic. But yeah, one of the main tools that I would highly recommend is just start asking questions. Like, okay, so what is going on here for this person? Because a question always empowers and an answer always disempowers. And Gary Douglas, who's the founder of all of these tools of access, and has worked with hundreds and thousands of people around the world with this stuff and with amazing results, he always says that, it's like a question always opens you up to what you know, so that then you're empowering the person to know that they have some kind of control over their life rather than putting them in this box of limitation. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a huge thing that can go in a million directions. So it's difficult to not go just in one, but yeah.
I know. We can go in a million different directions. So, okay. So the first thing that I mentioned was about. I know we're kind of going everywhere, but I don't mind if you don't. But the first thing that I mentioned was like about how when the energy doesn't match the. What's being? Can we go there for a minute? Because I was like, oh yeah, that would be cool to expand on, but
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
yeah. So what, like, because when this is what I wanted to say. I've seen like videos and of when the kids, or when they get frustrated at like whatever it is out here, like, do you think that is what's going on? Is like the energy is just not matching for them?
Is it?
Okay, so yeah, this is part of it. Okay.
Yeah, also really.
Hang on, wait, let me rephrase this for you. Okay, so when the energy is not matching, what is that? Like, what, can you give me like some, like, can we talk about that? Like,
First of all, I mean, like, for an energy to not be matching is a whole concept that might make people go, what is this? Like, what are you talking about? You know, but it's kind of like that energy of, you know, you walk into a room and everyone is clearly tense and angry and annoyed, and then they're like, hi. That's an example of like energy not matching. You know, but we're taught so much, you know, as we grow up and as we kind of like live our lives in society and in the world, that you're supposed to be like, okay, apparently we're all smiling, so we're all doing this smiling thing now and pretending that everything's going to be okay. But, you know, kids often are amazing, you know, facilitators as to what's really going on, because they'd be like, why is everyone so annoyed? And the parents kind of like, shh, you know, don't say the obvious. So that's a really good example of when the energy doesn't match. And yeah, you know, often what there is, you know, with people that have been labeled with these different things, particularly autism, is there is some kind of frustration where one thing is being said, but another thing is really going on. So because of the hyper awareness and acute awareness that these people have, it's often very difficult for them to actually gauge what is going on and how they should behave and why people are saying one thing when really they're actually communicating a whole other thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's, you know what, that all, to me, that all totally makes sense. And, you know, for anyone who is watching, it's like, you know, we've all had those experiences where we go and we talk to our friend, or even with, like, in relationships where you're just like, hey, what's wrong? And they say, nothing. Like, you know something's going on, right? It's just like, nothing, I'm fine. You know, like, that's just, you know, that's like kind of what we're talking about here. So I want to ask you something personal, is like, what had you, like, what hit your heart about, because not only are you facilitating X-Men classes, but you're also, like, in charge of creating, like, this access for kids, right? You're on that team. I know you have a lot to do with kids, and I wanted to know, what is it that personally hit your heart, that has you inspired to facilitate the X-Men classes and do all of this, because it's brilliant. I think it's wonderful what you're doing out there.
Thank you, thank you. I have to say, I see myself in it, like, so much. I see the little girl that at 7 years old, I mean, you know, it's funny, I was telling a few friends of mine the other day, they were talking about games that they used to play when they were kids, and I had to say, you know, I've got to be honest, I hate playing games. I did not understand. I remember saying to the children in my class when we were probably about 8 years old, why are you doing this? They give us 15-minute break to run around the playground and then come back in the room like we're hamsters exercising on a hamster wheel. Why are you going along with this? I was 8, okay, and so to me, I never understood. I would never play games. Like, sometimes I try and play a game, like, you know, where you run around, you touch someone, and then they pass it on. I'd be like, is this fun? Do I smile? Like, are we supposed to? Everything was so obscure and strange to me, and I would say to, you know, the kids in my school, like, why don't we sit around and talk about, like, the universe? Like, how is the planet floating in the middle, and there are other planets? Like, how is that, you know? And so you know, I was seen as, like, the really weird kid in many ways. And so when I started to come across all of this information, I was like, oh my God, if only I had had this when I was born. You know, when I was going through school, it would have made such a difference. You know, even things like, I remember being in secondary school and being given, you know, like a maths formula where you have perhaps like 3 months to figure out the equation and whatever. And within 3 minutes, I had the answer. Like, I just knew it. I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. And I just knew the answer. So I showed it to the teacher, and she was like, did you cheat? And I was like, how could I possibly cheat? Like, I'm just sat there, and you just asked the question. So I didn't actually get full grades because I didn't show all of the hard work, but I had the answer. So I was very lucky in the sense that the way that it's shown up for me is I do see the world differently, but I was always very quick, and, you know, stuff was always easy for me. But when I started to come across, you know, the X-Men information, what I realized was that everywhere that I'd really made myself wrong because I wasn't being like other people was actually a capacity. You know, I'm always looking like, okay, what is there behind this? Like, what is going on for the person that we're not even acknowledging, that perhaps they're not even acknowledging fully? they are aware of something. And so I saw myself so much in all of that, in every area of my life, in the way, my interactions with people, the way that I don't really like to be touched very much, the way that holding eye contact for ages with somebody, because always kind of like made me feel like I was being like electrocuted, or so, like whatever. But all these small things started to add up, and I was like, wow, like what would it be like if kids like me, who weren't necessarily diagnosed as having anything wrong, or perhaps they were, but whatever that is, what would it be like if everybody had access to all of this information and the tools, so that as they were growing up, they didn't think that they were messed up, they didn't think there was something wrong with them, but they actually realized, okay, maybe my brain is just wired differently, maybe I just interact in a different way. Maybe I don't like to play in the playground because I don't see the point of. I'd much rather discuss the planet.
Yeah.
As an 8-year-old, it was like
so I just want to acknowledge that I did say half hour, but if we go over a little bit, is that okay? Because I don't want to have us rush off of the hangout. So I think this is great information. I mean, I grew up not liking cartoons. Like, I hated cartoons. I just thought, I was like, there's nothing to this. And questions to the point that my parents bought me 2 sets of encyclopedias and were like, here. And can you just stop asking so many questions and stop asking why? And then my Saturday mornings was flipping through and reading about the human body and like the I can't even say the encyclopedias. Like, I mean, great if they had pictures, even better, but, I sat there and read texts on Saturday mornings.
And one of the things that I always mention in these seminars is, like, I don't know if my parents realized how brilliant they were and the gift that they were to me, because with both myself and my younger brother, they would always, whether we were 6 or 16 or 26, they would ask us. I remember being 6.5 years old, and my parents, us having dinner or lunch, I can't really remember, but they were like, okay, so we're thinking of moving house. What do you think about that? How would you feel about that? Do you think that house is going to work? It's just down the road, but it has 3 bedrooms, so you each have your own room. Like, what do you think? Should we move? And I constantly remember being asked questions about my opinion, not just how was your day at school, do you want to eat Cocoa Pops for breakfast, but actually real questions that allowed me to go, wow, I'm actually, like, my awareness counts for something here. I'm not even doing it like, hello, what would you like, but they would genuinely take in what I said. And, when I was a teenager, like, I was having, like, these great conversations with my parents about what different choices would create if we were to make them as a family or if they were to make them in their personal lives. And that was so empowering. So what I and that's brilliant, and that's such a gift. And I always encourage people to do that, which is why the power of the question for me is something just phenomenal, and it can be life-changing, truly.
Yeah. So there you have it, everybody, asking questions and just staying in the question rather than going around what the defined labels of all these things are. It's like, what else is possible for real, for you and for other people out there, when we just ask questions and go by what their feedback is to you, like. So I have another question for you, Diva. Like, how does one get to attend your class? Like, what are, like, how do they get to see you for X-Men, and, and what else do you got going on out there?
Sure. So you can find everything, all the upcoming classes at divadiaz.accessconsciousness.com or divadiaz.com. And to attend these classes, I do introductory classes, which are evening classes around the world, so those anybody can come to. If you've done Access Bars and Access Foundation and Level 1, then you can attend a 2-day X-Men class, and the class is called X-Men Disabilities or Abilities. And in that, we really go into a lot more detail of, like, how to actually uncover all of the capacities that are behind things like autism, OCD, ADD, ADHD, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, bipolar, Alzheimer's, you know, all of these millions of different things. It's 2 days of verbal processing. Sometimes we'll do a hands-on body process too. So it's really dynamic, and it's all using the Access tools, which I am so grateful for. So I'm kind of working with the X-Men classes at the moment, and I'm hoping to have some X-Men facilitators within the next year or so that we can actually start kind of getting this out into the world and really just inviting everyone to something else. Because, you know, it does apply to people who have been labeled or who work with someone who's been labeled or who in some capacity, you know, are connected to someone with a disability. But I also see how much it really, really is relevant to the creative minds of the world, the people who are looking for something else that's possible, the people who are so creative and then sometimes don't want to do anything for a whole week, they just want to watch TV. You know, those people with such creative capacities, a lot of these things, you know, and a lot of the tools in these classes are very, very relevant to them as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I've also attended some of your telecalls about like how I think creativity was one. It was a few years ago. I was getting up at like 5 in the morning when I think you were in some other country, right? And I was just like, okay, I got to listen to this because it really is some great information. But it's like, you know, like it was like I got to see a way of creating that the way that I created, just because I'm pretty much, I say I'm all over the place, and my desktop has all kinds of folders all over it, and I'm pretty it looks disorganized, but I get it. If I clean it up and organize it, then I don't know where anything is. And some of the classes that you teach are also like, you know, what if it's okay? Like, it just made me feel like me creating my business and me in creation wasn't so bad and wrong, you know, and so.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's something that I see in so many. I mean, I came from a corporate background. Like, I was working in economic intelligence, and I was, you know, it was like a pretty high-profile job. So I had to force myself to be organized in many ways, but my head, there was havoc. I mean, it was like insane havoc in my head. And it kind of worked on many levels, but if I'd had the tools, then gosh, it would have been so much easier. So now the way that I do business is so different. Now the way that I create projects is so different. The way that I can actually institute an idea rather than just having run around in my head forever is different. The way that relationships are different. And you know this, Tara, because you've done the classes as well, so you get how it's just every area of life.
Yeah, and I found that, like, when I'm dealing with other people, I find that it's easy for me to kind of, I don't know the words for it, but I can teach others, like, how to get along with me a lot easier now. It's like, well, look, I'm going to be kind of like, if I seem distant, it's just because I'm kind of like seeing a million things all at once, and you know what I mean? And people think it's really intriguing. Like, I noticed, like, it's kind of like, cool, okay. Like,
but there's something that comes when you have a weird way. Yeah, and there is, you know, like the way that you're saying now, how you're able to clearly be like, hey, if this is what it seems like I'm being, it may be that I've actually just got a million things in my head, but I am still here with you, present with the project or the job. There's something that comes with having a clarity of what's actually going on for you that allows your interaction with the world to be so much easier. And that's one of the main things that I found in business. So yeah, gosh, I am so grateful for these tools. It's unbelievable.
Me too. I'm grateful for the tools. I'm grateful that you took it on to take this stuff out into the world, like, seriously, because it's really made a difference in my life and in my world. And I'm getting text messages from people saying, this is great, like, you know. Listen, I just want to say one more thing to everybody. I don't know if you're still giving these out, but if you go to one of Diva's classes, you get a diary, and I write every day what I'm grateful for in the morning to create it, and at night before I go to sleep. So, but you know, I just want to thank you so much for being here. And wait, there was one more question that I've been asking everyone, and it's like this: if you could go back to the kid, right? before you had these tools, if you could go back to the you before you had all these tools, what would you say to that person? About your journey.
How
You know what
long
I
do
mean?
I have? I'm kidding.
Did you just go like everywhere? I'm just curious. I'm playing.
I would say everything that you think makes you insane is actually an awareness that you're having. So don't discount yourself. You're not as messed up as you think you are. And what is right about you and about everything that's going on that you're not getting. And anything is possible. You are correct. I know that you know that. So you can create it. You just have to choose. And go out and find access consciousness ASAP.
Yeah. Wow, that was beautiful. All right, so thank you so much, Diva. And like she said, if you can find her on her website, divadiaz.com, or divadiaz.accessconsciousness.com. All right, everyone, stay tuned. Oh, thank you so much. Hang on one more second. Stay tuned tomorrow at 2 p.m. EST. I'll be interviewing Amy Shine, and our topic is going to be, what if there is no illness in mental illness? All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, Diva, and thank you out there for tuning in and watching these videos, and we'll see you on the next one tomorrow. Bye.